This story ended the moment my mother tried to erase my father from our lives. By the time anyone understood what was really happening, the lie had already grown roots. Let me take you back to the beginning. The last thing I saw before everything changed was my father walking out of a diner in handcuffs, his shirt stained dark red, his face stunned like he could not believe what was happening to him. 5 months later, my mother was engaged to a man named Adrian, and she wanted me to call him Dad. That sounds fast, because it was fast. Too fast. And that is the first thing people miss about betrayal. It rarely arrives with a warning. It arrives wearing perfume, a smile, and a plan. My father, Daniel, kept saying he had been framed. I did not know how to prove it then. But I knew one thing for sure, the man my mother brought home was watching me like I was not a daughter. I was a problem. At first, Adrian was all charm. He brought gifts, fixed broken shelves, and spoke softly when my mother was around. But when she left the room, his face changed. He would stare too long. He would ask why I was so serious for a girl my age. He said things that sounded harmless if you did not listen closely. That is how manipulative people work. They hide poison in normal words. My mother called him patient. I called him creepy. The weirdest part was that she kept defending him like she was protecting a prize, not a family. And looking back now, I think that is where the real danger began. Not with violence. With denial. The first clue that something was wrong came from my father's letters. I had started writing to him in county lockup, slipping notes inside library books and mailing them from a friend's place because my mother checked everything at home. He wrote back in careful handwriting, always telling me to stay calm, stay smart, and watch what people did when they thought nobody was looking. One letter came on a torn piece of legal pad, and in the margin he had drawn a tiny square around a name, Mara's Auto Shop. I did not understand it then. A week later, I found a greasy receipt in my mother's coat pocket from a gas station 3 towns over. The time stamp matched the night my father was arrested. She said she had been out buying medicine. That was clue number 1. Clue number 2 was stranger. Adrian always wore a leather glove on his right hand, even indoors, even at dinner. He said it was from a burn injury. He said it casually, like the truth was supposed to stop the conversation there. Then came the moment that made everything worse. My mother changed my school records without telling me. She replaced our last name with Adrian's, like she could just rename the pieces she wanted to keep. That night, he sat on the edge of my bed and told me I needed to start accepting the new family structure. He put his hand on my knee and said I should be grateful because he was the kind of father who stayed. I pushed him away and locked myself in the bathroom until he left. When I told my mother, she sighed like I was embarrassing her. She said I was making things awkward on purpose. That was the lie's favorite hiding place, in the idea that the victim is always overreacting. I wrote to my father that same night. His reply came 2 weeks later, and the paper was wet at the edges, like he had cried while writing it. In that letter, he asked one question that I did not notice at first: did you look behind the furnace panel? I only understood what he meant after the worst weekend of my life. My mother said we were skipping my father's birthday visit because Adrian had already planned a family retreat at a lake hotel. She said my father was dangerous, that I needed to stop clinging to the man who ruined us. When I pushed back, Adrian hit me hard enough to make the room spin. My mother saw it. She saw everything. And she still made me go with them. At the hotel, Adrian got drunk. That night he came into my room and crossed a line he could never uncross. I will not turn that into poetry. It was ugly, it was humiliating, and it changed the shape of my life. When we came home, my father's letters were gone. My mother had burned them behind the house. Then she took my bedroom door off its hinges for trust reasons. That was not trust. That was control. People like to call control concern when it is worn by the right person. I knew then that I had to look for whatever my father was trying to tell me. My mother and Adrian left for dinner one Friday, and I climbed into the attic with a flashlight and shaking hands. Behind the furnace panel, just like he said, was a plastic-wrapped notebook. Inside it were pages from before his arrest. One entry stopped me cold. He had written that he saw my mother and Adrian meeting at a roadside bar weeks earlier. Another page mentioned a missing kitchen knife and a torn receipt from Mara's auto shop. The final page said something that made my stomach drop: "If anything happens to me, it will not be an accident." That was the moment the story stopped being about a bad stepfather and became something much darker. Or at least, that was one explanation. The other was even worse. My mother may not have planned the murder, but she knew enough to choose silence. Sometimes guilt does not need a weapon. It only needs cowardice. When they came home early, I was still in the attic. Adrian climbed up the ladder and found me with the notebook. He asked me what I was doing, but his voice was calm in the way a locked door is calm. He already knew. He had that look people get when the last loose end finally appears in their hand. My mother stood below, pretending not to see the notebook tucked against my side. I said I was looking for old boxes, but he was already moving toward me. He grabbed my wrist and asked who else knew. That is when I realized he was not afraid of being caught by my mother. He was afraid of me being believed. There is a difference. One is legal. The other is deadly. I got away only because my mother called up to us to come down for dinner, and he froze long enough for me to slip past him. That tiny pause may have saved my life. The next day, I copied every page of the notebook with my phone and hid the original inside the back of a loose vent in the hallway. Then I called the only person I still trusted, my father's old friend, Mr. Ellis, a mechanic who had known our family for 20 years. He came to meet me near the library and listened without interrupting. He said my father had not been acting strange before the arrest, but my mother had. He remembered Adrian showing up at the diner often, always watching my father from the same corner booth. He remembered a woman in a red coat leaving with Adrian the night everything happened. That detail mattered. A small thing, but small things are usually where the truth hides. Another clue came from the old security footage from the diner's back hall. Adrian had been in the building before my father entered the restroom. He had enough time to set the frame, plant the knife, and disappear before anyone looked closely. My father had not killed anyone. He had walked into a scene someone else built. By the time we showed the evidence, my mother's story collapsed in pieces. The police reopened the case. The footage, the notebook, the witness statements, and the receipt from the auto shop all pointed in one direction. Adrian had staged everything to make my father look guilty and make my mother dependent on him after the arrest. And the disturbing part was how easily it worked. My mother had wanted a clean story: bad father, good replacement, quick healing. People love simple stories because simple stories ask less of them. But truth is never simple when fear is involved. Adrian was arrested, and the ugly parts came out one by one. The threats. The manipulation. The way he had chosen us because my mother was lonely and my father was already being painted as a monster. In the end, my father was released. Not triumphant. Just tired. Like a man who had been buried alive and finally found daylight. I expected everything to feel better after that. It did not. It felt real. There is a difference. My father came home thinner, quieter, and older than I remembered. My mother tried to apologize, but apologies mean very little after you help build the cage. I did not forgive her right away. Maybe I still have not. That is the quiet, disturbing truth nobody likes to say out loud. The damage is not only what the liar did. It is also what the witness allowed. My mother had seen enough to know better, and she chose convenience over instinct. Adrian was the one who framed my father, but she was the one who opened the door. In the months that followed, my father and I rebuilt a life that was smaller, slower, and far more honest. We did not become perfect. We became real. And that was enough. The worst stories are not always the loudest ones. Sometimes the danger is hidden in what seems ordinary. A new boyfriend. A calm voice. A mother who wants peace so badly she confuses it with truth. And sometimes the person everyone calls a monster is actually the one trying to warn you.